Natural disaster strikes Indonesia. Heavy rain causes massive floods in Sumatra. These news headlines, do we really understand them? My name is Karan, and this is my podcast, Uncensored. Like the conversation that I had with my brother, many younger people like my brother might have gotten the wrong idea of this flood and what actually caused it.
Oh, this must be an environmental issue, right? Maybe we just need to plant more trees, I guess.
Now, these aren't entirely wrong. But something that I've realized through watching the news a lot, researching deeply into this issue, is that these environmental issues are not just natural, but they indeed carry some political value, political ties as well, especially with domestic policies, especially in Indonesia. So in this podcast, I really want to not just explain what happened, but why this happened in a simpler version that maybe you guys can understand. Not merely explaining the factors that link to environmental stuff, but also government policies, domestic policies, economic priorities by these corporations, and how it affects our daily lives and the daily lives of local Sumatrans. So by the end of this podcast, I really want to emphasize that, remind you guys that politics isn't far away from us, the younger generation, the younger people, as many young people, in fact, in Sumatra are feeling the impact of this issue already. And if it's possible by the end of this podcast, if you really understood and grasped the situation, grasped the severity of the situation, I would advise you to, step out of your comfort zone and make other people aware as well. Let's say you have a bathroom drain and then you plug out that bathroom drain, you rip it out of your bathroom, right? You turn on the shower. And then when the water comes down, boom, it floods. Yeah, that's basically happening in Sumatra. And that's basically deforestation. For the younger audience who might not know what deforestation is, don't worry, I've also been in your situation. Like when I was 12 years old, when I just got into biology class in school, even my science teacher was talking about, deforestation, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't actually know how it connects to these floods, how it connects to these natural disasters that are happening not just in Indonesia, but across the globe. But basically the gist of it is that you're chopping down trees at a massive rate and in a large area where they can't regrow at a fast rate. When it rains a lot and there are no trees around, of course the water has nowhere to go. The only drain that the Sumatran forests have are these trees. That's the only thing that comes between rain and flooding. Now, like I've said before, the problem isn't just environmental. The government is fully aware that this is happening and has preventive measures already made for this type of issue. It's not just Indonesia, but the whole world has already experienced this. So it's not different. It's not familiar. We already know what to do. But the problem is legal loopholes and domestic policies and our priorities as a nation. Because again, Indonesia is a developing nation. Now, what do developing nations usually do? They prioritize economic growth. The Indonesian government recognizes that Sumatra is a major exporter of timber, oil, paper. But right now, with our current economic and legal system, the ways we're doing this, the methods of extraction are highly unsustainable, and therefore we're cutting more trees than we can plant. Not to mention the amount of illegal logging there are in the Sumatran Islands, the amount of unregulated extraction, unregulated mining. That's just the result of dangerous legal loopholes that exist within our environmental domestic policies. That is what we need to fix right now. Now, let's dive into the specifics of these domestic issues, domestic policies that may need some reviewing in the future. So let's discuss them now. There are 5 different points. Now, the first one I would like to address is the absence of enforcement power, enforcement mechanisms. Now, again, we already have a lot of policies in place, right? We have environmental statutes, environmental impact assessments from international organizations, and forest zoning laws. But the problem isn't absence of laws. We have a lot of laws, like I just said. It's just that we don't have enough enforcement mechanisms. It's not that we don't have the capacity, but it's just that us as a nation, we prioritize more economic growth, and therefore we risk not monitoring the environment enough. And instead we monitor our economic growth instead. What we need to do is more transparency within environmental impact assessments, more enforcement mechanisms, maybe with incentives towards these large corporations, large domestic corporations, to alter their methods of extraction to more sustainable ones that fit into, let's say, the idea of a circular economy. So the second factor that I've yet discussed is land permits and how it's used in the context of Sumatran floods. Forest land in Sumatra is often labeled as convertible. These lands, these forests are able to be used for many extraction purposes, mining, oil plantation, or even logging. But the problem here is that there is a set of environmental criteria that the government and corporations are obliged to follow when they are processing with these extraction methods, extraction processes. By criteria, I mean environmental criteria where they evaluate the destruction it may potentially cause to biodiversity for one, forests, or maybe even ecosystems that are meant to be protected. But the problem is that there's not a lot of transparency as these decisions are made at merely bureaucratic regional levels instead of maybe a more transparent mechanism. And therefore these companies are able to violate what their criteria allows them to do. And therefore they go beyond what the government tells them to do. And that is also a major issue regarding the over-extraction of resources, which in this case happens to be cutting down an excess amount of trees, causing more flooding around that specific area. Next is the third factor, which is decentralized authority. What decentralized authority basically means in the context of Indonesia is that since we have so many regional provinces, we have so many local communities, the authority of these local areas fall onto local or regional government. This isn't essentially a bad thing, but then companies are able to exploit this because different regional bodies, different provinces have different standards, specifically on environmental standards, specifically on extraction limits and forest protection zones. And therefore, these companies are able to exploit that even further. This is what we mean by legal loopholes. We need more communication, more unification on what these standards must look like throughout different provinces and what these limits look like, because right now companies are easily manipulating the loopholes between these regions and therefore extracting more than they need to, causing more environmental damage. Now this leads on to my fourth point, enforcement gaps. Of course, with many regional bodies acting in different standards, different criteria, of course, there's bound to be some enforcement gaps of how they're dealing with this issue, especially when we're talking about illegal logging, which has been a major issue that contributes to the mass deforestation of the Sumatran forests, which and then leads to the floods. With a lot of illegal logging happening here and no sort of consensus of what to do, there's not much consequences for these companies who undergo this illegal process, and therefore the one getting punished is not the company but the environment surrounding the forest. These are the legal loopholes that must be addressed. Again, to reaffirm what I said before, it's not that we don't have a lack of laws, it's just that these companies have been finding legal loopholes within these, so revision is really necessary for these laws, or else the issue is just going to keep on going on for longer than we can even handle it. So on to my final point. Corruption risks. Now this is a major issue in Indonesia, not just in the environmental sectors, but in every sector of Indonesia. Corruption risks in this context is basically the problem of systemic incentives that lead to environmental damage. Like for example, the bribery of land permits. Companies bribing the government or government officials for land permits for them to extract more than they need to, do their economic activities in maybe zones that they aren't supposed to, because they have many different habitats or maybe endangered species. This is, I think, one of the most major factors that prolong this issue until today. So let's just state the obvious here. The problem is not that we couldn't predict this event. We have environmental impact assessments for a reason, and they have detected the possibility of a massive flood in Sumatra for over a year ago. And within the context of legal and domestic policies, NGOs have even noted the legal loopholes within these policies and have even notified several bodies regarding this, but why have we not reviewed them ourselves? That is the question. It's not that we don't have the capability to review this, as we have reviewed many existing laws before, not just environmental, but across all sectors. The problem is that we, as a developing nation, need to keep developing our economy and therefore risk our environments. That isn't just Indonesia itself, but there are also many other developing nations that are actively doing this for the sake of their economic growth. So my final question before I end off this podcast, how many more trees, how many more forests, how many more species must be destroyed before the government will politically and legally acknowledge the root cause, which is the legal loopholes, the lack of enforcement mechanisms? And that is a question that we must dwell on as the younger generation, as we will be the ones that will be holding those positions of power, and we must reflect upon those questions when we make those important decisions in the future. If you like this podcast episode, if you like the way I explain things, if you like the way how I deliver things for maybe younger audience, maybe you can tune into my future podcasts that explain a variety of problems that affect the youth, especially not only in Southeast Asia where I live, but in many parts of the world. I encourage you guys to subscribe, to hit the notification bell. I think that's it. See you in my next podcast.